All right, so welcome, Woody. Welcome back. Thanks again for being willing to continue discussing all kinds of topics that whatever strikes our fancy, I suppose, is one way to look at this. And we've got a guest joining us today. We hope that others in the future will seek to join us too in this kind of dialogue. Woody's being very open and gracious and actually suggested this notion of maybe we can get other people involved in it. So, Billie, would you mind introducing yourself to our audience?
Absolutely. My name is Billie Grissom, and I'm a collaborative family law attorney in Bothell, Washington, which is a smaller suburb of the greater Seattle-Puget Sound region. And I, my practice, I opened my solo practice about 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, and stopped taking litigation cases and finished my last litigation case over a year ago. So I do now only mediation, collaborative, out-of-court options.
Okay. Thank you. Wait, I've lost all three of us. How do I do that again? There we go. So, Billie, I know you came with a question you wanted to launch us off with, and that's what we'd like to do. If you could
Very good.
Just raise the topic. Thanks.
Okay. In some of my collaborative cases over the last couple of years, I've noticed a tendency, especially when they're smaller teams or just attorney teams, for the process to kind of deteriorate, if you will, into more of a traditional negotiation. And it doesn't always feel right, and I feel like maybe we're risking a durable agreement, and my question was, how do we avoid getting to that position, and what do we do if we find ourselves there?
Oh, what a wonderful question, Billie. And, you know, it's interesting. One way of focusing on it is what happens when we get to crisis, and the other is how do we prevent crisis from happening. I like to start there because I think that whatever we do to lay the positive groundwork from our own peacemaking makes the walkout, makes the breakdown much less likely to happen. So can we sort of start at the beginning and ask some questions, and we can sort of walk through it together?
Sure.
Would that be all right? So focusing on if there's either a composite case or one case you're thinking of in particular, and you can let us know which that is. How did the parties get to the table, and what were their expectations as communicated by the professionals when they started?
Well, in one particular case, and the composite even that I'm thinking of, both parties were interested in using a collaborative process, and as is often the case in the age we live in today, looking to save money and resources, because most of the time there's very little of both, and oftentimes as part of that, because the case is either not that complex, so they opt to not use a financial professional. Although I've had it happen even if there's a financial professional present, and I had it in one case when there was a full team. And so it just kind of feels like, and I know sometimes in collaborative cases, just getting to the good enough is probably the best you're going to get. But it's happened enough that I want to look at that deeper and find out if there's something that I'm in particular doing, or something that I can bring back to the teams to try and avoid it.
Well, let's go right, if I might, with your standard of when an agreement is ready and ready for signing. And I'll translate it to words that I use in all the work that I do with my practice group and the people that I work with is can I live with it? It isn't the highest form of everything I aspire. It isn't the lowest form of what the law might entitle me to or what the other side deserves. It is more looking at everything that we've discussed. Can I go on with my life based on this? If the answer, and that is also one of the expectations going in. And so if the answer is yes, we then write it up, and then we can talk about strategies for making it the most durable and foundational agreement possible. And I want to focus on those. If the answer is no or maybe, we keep talking. And so it's a fluid process. However, the standard, if it's agreed to by both, often is a workable, realistic, and achievable standard. So I guess my question is, at the front end, was what the criteria for a good agreement might be, was that discussed? That's not really my first question. It just happens to be the one that comes up now.
Yeah, it really was. We went over high-end goals for both parties and talked about what are their priorities and really got a good sense of what each party wanted from the process, if you will. I'm just not quite sure. I don't know. I feel like it's maybe something that the attorneys do, because even, doing this process for 6 years and now limiting my practice to out-of-court settlements, it's still really easy, I find, to fall back into the old traditional mode. And so that I guess setting the client's expectations and the party's expectations, we do discuss, as I said, we've discussed their high-end goals and the process that we're going to go through. I think what has happened is at some point somebody's just ready to be done, which I'm sure we've all experienced, and when that happens, then there's kind of this big push and rush, or someone has either lost interest to the extent that they're not participating fully anymore, dragging their feet on getting information, which then has necessitated the other spouse to say, okay, let's get this done and like just start making offers.
Well, both of those, I'm sure all of us have experienced, and the question I'm going to ask and we can delve into is what was some of the foundational work that was done, knowing that this happens again and again, both of loss of interest or the need to move on with one's life, stop paying all these bills, having not to go through the pain of having to stay uncertain and deal with someone that you want to work with collaboratively but really want to separate permanently from. All these, I think, are very common and replicable situations. Carmichael, I noticed you had something you wanted to say?
I'm bubbling with a few different questions that I wanted to pursue, if I may. One was, in part, I'm trying to be mindful that our audience isn't only trained collaborative professionals. So my question comes a little bit from that, but also from trying to understand exactly what the challenges are so that we can talk about how to address those. And so it's a question of, when you say fall back into traditional negotiation, it seems to me that it is helpful to address what happens as well as how to correct it. If we have a description of what traditional negotiation is, and then particularly versus collaborative. So what is it you're seeing that you're summarizing as we fall into traditional negotiations?
Well, in the case that I'm thinking of in particular, some time had gone by without another team meeting and without another meeting scheduled. There was some homework that was to be done, and then we were going to regroup, and then at some point, some period of time went by, and so the attorneys talked and said, well, maybe we should just make a proposal. My client just wants to be done, and there's no money, and so then I said, well, I suppose we can try that. I was trying to get my client back involved in the process. And that's the one that had dropped out a little bit. And so with that proposal, then once that proposal comes, then the traditional negotiation process or the feeling of that is where that all comes from. So then we look at the proposal and make counter proposals or say, well, yes to this, no to that. And this has all happened via email in an effort to try and save on resources.
So instead of the collaborative approach of looking at each party's needs and then determining how what can happen that works as close as possible to meeting both of their needs, instead of that, what you're describing is here's a number, now you give me a number back. So the standard,
yes.
So it's like the standard shifts from the ideal and idealistic intent of meeting everybody's needs to simply, let's get out of here. Let's pass notes back and forth. Okay.
That's pretty much what happened, although we did spend time in team meetings exploring their needs and interests, and as I said early on, with their high-end goals, and did some brainstorming, but then, as I said, time went by, and then it's come to this. So trying to regroup, and I also, a couple of times, sent emails out to the team. Maybe we should have another meeting. Where's everybody at? How are things going? And pretty much the majority of the consensus was they didn't want to have another meeting. So if I'm the only person that wants that's kind of difficult as well.
Yeah.
So could we talk about a couple of things? First of all, it's really easy to do Monday morning quarterbacking with somebody else's case. And I don't think that anyone wants to do that because we're all faced with these challenges all the time, Billy. So let me just throw out a couple of ideas that I often work with. And, it's a struggle. And I think what you're talking about, everyone who's watching this has either felt it as a professional or maybe been in it as far as a party is concerned. And what you're talking about is the difference between building an agreement together and negotiating positions, which by the nature of it causes people to be unhappy. I could tell when you said the word proposal, your eyes narrowed and you didn't like that, okay? As most of my collaborative colleagues and I don't. The question is, what do we do about it? Because this just happened to me last month when it was my client who said, enough meetings, let me just send a proposal. And I said both privately to him, and then I worked with the other members of our team. We have a neutral mental health professional and a neutral financial. And I said, what do you think about sending proposals versus building it together? And with an open question like that, they hit it out of the park. They did great. They were then able to say all the things that we know wrong about trading proposals. And my client backed off. So there were several lessons. Maybe you can tell me the lessons you learned just by hearing that, if there are any.
I really like what you say, the words you used about building it together, because that's really, and it's a great way to describe it. I think that would have been a great thing to say at that point is, well, we could do that, but is that really collaborative? Is that really what these parties want? And is that the best way that we can serve them?
May I stop for a moment? I always question whether I'll just tell you personally, I don't use the word collaborative like that. And one of the reasons that I don't is everyone will say, yes, it's collaborative to do a nice proposal. It's collaborative to build an agreement together. It's like, what is permissibly religious? I would like to break it down into what works for the parties. In a way, it's using self-interest in an enlightening way. And so I hope one of the things that I try to do, and I've seen in very successful collaborative professionals, is you ask first of all, working in questions rather than statements, because we all react to statements in a, how would we say, not as positive a way as we might, because we get put on the griddle. But by asking questions of what they need and what works, and using team members to give their perspectives, because I trusted those team members, and I hoped that they would say what they said, which was, once we get into trading proposals, we're one step closer to impasse or termination, which is exactly what the parties don't want. And part of it is to go to those higher parts of them in that they really want this agreement. So they're asking for us, and I'll use another word, as designers of the process. And one of the aspects of process design is for us to talk about what we have in common, what is it that each needs that isn't there, and how do we get there that will help both of them. And that one, it's like playing, tennis. You can hit the ball against the backboard, and that's a proposal, or you can work together when somebody is hitting it back to see how you might keep the rally going. And I want to keep the rally going, having a good conversation. So I don't know if that's helpful at all, Billie, but those are just a few thoughts that I have.
That's very helpful, actually, and I like what you said about not using the word collaborative. That it is a very generic term, and I'm sure that as many different people think about that term, you could probably have that many different interpretations of it. So that makes a lot of sense.
It's also
to focus.
Go ahead. Collaborative is also. No, go ahead. You finish. It's the time lag. Go ahead. You finish your thought.
Yeah, just to focus instead on the co-creating this agreement rather than using certain terminology.
Collaborative is also a word, especially among collaboratively trained professionals, that can be used even unintentionally, but can come out in a very insulting way. I lump when I'm working with clients, I give them a little list of words that I urge them to never use. One of them is fair. Another is reasonable. I tell them never say in the meetings, here is something I think is fair or reasonable. Similarly, as professionals, or I could see clients doing the same thing, talking about this doesn't feel collaborative. It just kind of brings everything to a halt and puts the other person in a real defensive place. How does one respond? Yeah, Woody?
You mean really what it says is I'm collaborative and you're either I'm okay, you're okay, I'm okay, you're so-so, I'm collaborative, you're what?
I'm okay, you stink.
You know, when I see that in either a conference or in a case or on the listserv, it doesn't feel peacemaking to me. But the way you're describing it now does. That in a sense, you're helping us break down what really we all share by being collaborative professionals. And that is that we try and it's really a refined I statement. When we say it isn't fair, we're saying you're unfair, but I am. And so if we can say what I need, then you're speaking for yourself, and it doesn't bring about that insulting aspect that you're talking about.
Yes. Yeah. The other end of what I tell them is don't say here's something that I think is fair or reasonable or in line with collaborative. You can always say in response to what someone else says, I feel that's really fair. I think what you have said is reasonable. That can be gold in a meeting like this.
That's our cement.
Right. You know,
it's interesting you're talking about something else that I'd like to get both of your thoughts about.
Okay.
What you're doing is catching your client being good at their highest selves. I said this in the Pittsburgh masterclass last week. No one is born to be a client, and no one is born to be a collaborative client. It's not a DNA property that comes in the chromosomes. We have to teach. We're really teachers and learners as opposed to negotiators, I find. So that what you're doing, Carl Michael, by going over some tips for success, whether it's a don't or it's a do, whichever way is best for your personality, doesn't matter. I always like the do as opposed to the don't, but both work. Helping people understand what will work, have them practice with us privately before we get into joint sessions, so that we don't have a conflict in the first place. Because that's Billie's question. What can we do to prevent those cases from breaking down? And it is, it's our life's work to answer that question. I mean, you came here with decades worth of conversation, Billie, and these little baby steps of preparing one's client, helping them be the best that they can be, helping them speak in high statements, helping them understand those aspects, to me, make it possible for people to have conversations, productive conversations. When people have productive conversations, those, in my view, lead more often to agreements. Now, I don't know. There's a lot there. I'd love to hear. I really want to hear your thoughts there and other places, because I think you Billie, have put your finger right on the sore. How do we make them be the best that they can be?
And that really is. And speaking of finger on the sore, and so much of, it takes time. It takes, like you said, time meeting with your client in private and practicing some of these techniques and continuously educating and re-educating and giving them tips and balancing that with their resources and their ability to be able to afford not only the team meetings, but additional meetings with me before and after. And it really has to be a commitment on their part. And, as we go throughout the process, I try to reevaluate and continuously make sure that they're on board. Economics are a huge factor.
Economics are a huge factor. When I'm talking with clients, I try to encourage them to think in terms of my summary statement to them is how long this takes and how much it costs is mostly a function of how much you two fight or disagree. And my role as the professional is to aid and support you in not disagreeing, so that you can reach agreement. That's the way I always turn it back to the clients and say, yes, it's going to be more expensive if you don't have another meeting, if you don't share with me and then with the full, with your soon-to-be ex, exactly what it is you need and, what need of yours that will serve, so that we can talk about it, discuss whether it can happen. One of the things, going back to the situation that you outlined, I don't know, and I don't want to Monday morning quarterback, but you talked about the meetings stopped, and then it was hard to get people back. I try very hard to. In fact, when I meet with clients and we start the process, I tell them up front what we're going to be doing is scheduling 4 meetings. As part of every meeting's agenda, we will have the next 3 to 4 meetings scheduled. And they only get canceled if there's real need to cancel them. But we've got to have some accountability to each other in the working environment there. And if the meetings go from, okay, that was really good, and we'll get together with a series of emails and try to schedule another one, that just drags things out, and frankly, I think runs up the bill unnecessarily. It's so much easier when you've got 4 people in a room to schedule 4 meetings than it is to try to do it over email.
You're making an incredibly important point, I think, and that is that clients are responsible for their own agreement. I often in trainings will say, when we and the team are working harder than the clients, there is something wrong. And we have to sort of re-involve the clients, because it is their life. It is their life to succeed, and it is their life to stumble and to not get there as fast or not at all. And so I think we always have to remember that. But there's another point of our responsibility as their professionals. I remember once learning from John Haynes, who was a father of the modern mediation movement. Are either of you familiar with his work? He was really the head of the academy. He founded the Academy of Family Mediators. He has done a whole series of tapes. I learned from him, about 30 years ago, 25 years ago, probably. It took me 5 years to find him. He used to say, when something goes wrong at the table, we need to ask ourselves, what can we be doing differently? So that as designers of the process and their professionals whom they're paying, it's really to ask those questions in a curious way of ourselves and of our team. Right before I got on the phone with you today, I had a matter in which It was a collaborative case, and the financial professional came in. It was a professional firm that was being evaluated, and the report of the neutral financial wasn't as clear as it could have been. And I take some responsibility for that, and I think I call him my collaborative partner, the other lawyer, also needs to take that responsibility, and he did, is that we didn't instruct him properly. We didn't take the time to make sure he knew what we were expecting. We just assumed. Assumptions always get us in trouble, that he's done enough of these reports where he would lay out what he found in goodwill and what he found in receivables, and how collecting receivables down the road for the parties would impact support. These aren't unsophisticated issues. They're sophisticated issues for us, and I imagine for the clients. And we needed to spend more time with him on that. And so while his presentation was confusing and actually enraged one of the parties, both because of what the party said was a waste of time and lack of clarity, and we have to now improve on that. But second, I think we as professionals got a wake-up call again, and we'll get many more, that we have to be very vigilant in making sure that we come through with what we say we're going to, even if it's not on our watch. His watch was financial, but our watch was making sure that he did the best he could on financial. I'm just wondering if either of you have thoughts about that.
The extent to which we trip ourselves up in all of these things is it can be amazing to watch sometimes. As you were describing that, I was thinking back to Billie's original thoughts about we return to the familiar, traditional negotiations, and dovetailing into the notion of the assumptions we make. We don't, when we're talking to one of our other colleagues who's working with us on the case, and we assume that they know what we're thinking. And of course, she knows what I want with this client. We've worked together. Part of that, it's just human anxiety around our own normal deficiencies. None of us is God or even godlike. None of us is perfect. And where we get into challenges is, I think, in part when we run right up against the reality of that, and it scares us a little bit. And we don't do what we should be doing, which is exactly what we would advise our clients to do, and that's ask somebody. If it feels like I've run out of ideas in a case to help the clients, I do have a whole community around me. Resort to the listserv in, my local practice organizations, other people I've worked with. Hey, this is what's going on, and I'm stuck. Do you have any ideas for me? And maybe even, I know in our earlier conversations, Woody, you've talked about times when you've brought in a mediator to a collaborative practice movement matter, or even this one intrigued me from the last time we spoke, the notion of a litigating consultant. But it's if you've got impasse, one way to look at that is simply, I've run out of ideas, and so let's look someplace else for more ideas. That's what came up for me from what you were saying, Woody. So I don't know if
and for me as well, going back to what you kind of led off with, Carmichael, is the accountability piece for the team, for the attorneys, and you touched on this too, Woody, as well as for the clients, and having the courage and the wherewithal and the vulnerability to say, this is the elephant in the room. I think that's, as human beings, that's a very difficult thing to do. And part of me feels like sometimes that's probably what's going on.
Billie, you're with Cypress Group, are you not?
I am.
Are you with the Cypress? Yes. Can I take a little diversion, Carmichael, and talk about my admiration for the Cypress Group and how that answers Billie's question herself?
Sure, by all means. But
first of all, I met Billie and her Cypress Group compatriots when I was invited up to do some training in Seattle for a conference almost 2 years ago. And I was so impressed. There was this group that came lockstep together into all the meetings, and they filled this round table, and they were huddled with each other, and they were asking each other's questions, and they seemed to they didn't finish each other's sentences, but they could have. And so, you remember this, Billie? I came over and I said, who are you? What are you doing? I loved it. And they said, we're the Cypress Group. And I said, well, what's the Cypress Group? And I'm going to have Billie describe it because you're a member of it. But I was so impressed with their commitment to actually answering your own question of how to prevent impasses from happening, because you study together frequently, you are committed together to the highest levels of practice and of getting cases. I was so impressed that I had an author whose work wasn't going to be used for the special issue of the Family Court Review, and I had an opening, and I said, would you write a collective article about Cypress Group? And not only did they almost cheered in unison, because they said, oh, we want to share our story. In the next day, they had an outline, and in 1 week, they had a completed article, which was brilliant. It was considered, I think, the best article in the and most innovative article in the special issue of April 2011. And no one took personal credit. Every member of the group was listed as an author alphabetically. You sure? You got me at hello. And I've been a aficionado of Cypress ever since. I'm just wondering, Billie, if you could just maybe share with our viral world here what Cypress does that might answer your question. I'm curious too to hear it.
Well, Cypress, we're a group of collaborative professionals, attorneys, mental health, financial, and we came together to form a slightly different type of practice group. We pool our resources for marketing purposes, and we work on cases together. We meet every week for 2 hours at a local bookstore that's very generous with their space. And in fact, today we met. It's every Thursday morning from 8 until 10. This morning we met to go into one of our attorneys' new offices and kind of bless the space and welcome her in her new office and share a meal together, talk a little bit about some of our business with Cypress, and we do typically every week we do a check-in, a few moments with each member to see what's going on in their lives. So we live and grow and learn together. Right now we're reading. We just finished Ken Cloke's the Crossroads of Conflict, which was fabulous. And we are now reading Taking the War Out of Our Words by Sharon Ellison, who some of us saw at our annual CPW conference last fall. So we really do work and grow together. We take a few moments, so we try to take a few moments at each meeting to talk a little bit about our casework and issues that we might have and resolve together. So it really is an environment of getting to know each other very well, both personally and professionally, working together, and it's been a fabulous experience. Most recently, in December, we just launched our bus ad campaign. So on some of the buses in the greater Puget Sound area, specifically northern Puget Sound region, you could see the transit buses with Cypress Collaborative Solutions ads on them. And we've gotten generated some interest from those bus ads, and we're just constantly working to explore and expand and extend our knowledge base and collaborative in our community.
So, Carl Michael, now you know why I'm an aficionado.
Absolutely. It sounds wonderful. And a question arose lots of questions and lots of envy. It sounds, it's way too far from Chicago. Sometimes it can be a challenge, a different type of challenge, to talk about a case that I've had trouble with and spell that out in a group of people. It can also be a different challenge from that comes when I'm in the middle of having a problem and need to turn to some one individual. It's Monday before the next four-way, and I know what I'm facing, and I can talk about it after I on this coming Thursday with your group, after I've struggled with it, or I can reach out to someone beforehand. And it sounds to me like ideally you've got a collection of people who you might well feel confident enough to do just that with. I
do, and we really can. And there have been times when I call somebody in the group and, I think about whatever the issue is and for instance, Laura might have some good ideas on what to do with this particular scenario. So I pick up the phone and call, and we do that with each other. It's been very helpful.
I mean,
but you're right.
Yeah.
Calling and asking other people, someone perhaps outside of that particular situation, to look in and say, a fresh set of eyes, probably never hurt.
Yeah.
One of the things I love about Cypress is exactly what Billie was doing just now. She exudes positive affirmation personally with the people in the group. There are, there are people with more or less talent. There are people with more or less experience. There are people with different priorities and even practice models that are favored. But there's no righteous litmus test of what is Cypressian. There is no sense that if you do something differently than I do, you may either be blackballed literally or seen less of as far as the group is concerned. If I could share something that just happened in my life 2 weeks ago with one of your Cypress people. Kevin Scudder applied to be a assistant trainer with me for my 40-hour mediation course in Los Angeles. Every course I have a volunteer who wants to learn about training. And Kevin had applied before, and I had selected someone else, and he applied again, and I was thrilled to be able to invite him to spend 5 days with me as my right hand in a training that included collaborative professionals, but others as well. To a person, in our closing ceremony, we always have a closing ceremony at the end of every training, they thanked me and thanked me for Kevin and thanked Kevin for what he had done. He had personally taken his peacemaking commitment and infused it in every person there. And at times when I was busy running the training or organizing or lecturing, he was looking for connection time. And boy, was he successful. And he set a gold standard for future trainer interns. And my guess is he got something out of it too, Billy. I mean, I haven't talked to him since.
Oh, I'm sure he did. He was very enthusiastic this morning as he shared briefly at our Cyprus meeting his experiences and how it just kind of seemed to flow very naturally for him and the two of you working together. And it was, yeah, he was very excited about that. And to talk about exuberance as he was sharing, I mean, his face just lit up and he was all smiles and talked about the camaraderie and the easy flow between the two of you, and that at a certain point, fairly early on, that you had the confidence in him to look to him to speak to the group and answer questions. And,
it was a metaphor for work. Pardon me. It was a metaphor for working on a case, and I must say, Carl Michael, we're talking about your life. That's what you do at the listserv. That's what you did with the holistic lawyers. It isn't just protocol. It isn't just marketing. It's something. Maybe we can put our finger on exactly on what it is, but it's something that separates what really new paradigm is. And I think, in a practical way, that is another answer to your question, Billy. When the members of the team, whether it's just two lawyers, coaches in whatever design or model, and financial professional, whether they're all the time or on occasion, when they all have that commitment, it exudes to the parties. And it gets them over sometimes the hump of having to do a proposal. And maybe will allow them to have those conversations when they're tired of having conversations. Sometimes saying it, as we all know in our personal lives, like when you're married, you only really have 5 conversations, 5 topics. You just keep talking about them again and again in different ways. But we got to have them. So if they get tired of having conversations of the 250 issues in a divorce, well, we may need to model for them and affirm for them the importance of going it over maybe another time.
Mm-hmm. A couple of things. First, I want to be mindful of where we are in terms of time, and we're pushing, I think, an hour at this point. So, just let me know if you need to cut off. But I wanted to say a couple of things about what I've heard in this track, if I may. What you were getting into, Woody, is that what for me is the notion of what is loosely referred to as the paradigm shift. There's so many ways to describe how the paradigm shifts, and what that it's connected to that notion, Billy, that you were talking about of we come from an ideal of the collaborative practice, and then when it gets tough, we fall into, our comfort zones. And one of the things that I always like to emphasize is that the paradigm shift is never done. A little quip I came up with not long ago was, if you say you've made the paradigm shift, that alone may be proof that you haven't. So something conish about that. But anyway, and I wanted to say how much value I believe is in what you guys are bringing here, especially as you talk about professionals' intentionality around reaching out to each other, because that gets the clients so much more. It gets them not just me, not just my abilities. It gets them the world around me as well. And the group I'm in, like the wonderful group you're in, Billie, that's really who's supporting the client. It's not just you. It's not even just the team. It's the whole extended team for whom the clients aren't even paying, which is great. And that
it really does take a village.
Yeah. Well, it doesn't have it. People try to make it not take a village. And that can be when they most need the village.
Carmichael?
Yeah.
Carmichael, can I put it into the crassest type of terms?
Sure.
If I might.
I like crass.
So I always like to. Okay, let's talk crass.
Yeah.
In a way, what you're saying, and I'm sorry for interrupting, is that our non-billable time to make ourselves the quality and sensitive, hopefully, collaborative professionals will, in my view, translate into bottom line dollars of cases coming in. Because people get confidence in an intangible way that cannot be prescripted. And that what you're talking about, to me, isn't done in 6 months, because, sprinters get out there for the right after training and want to change the world, but 6 years and maybe I'll be modest, 4 or 5 decades. Mm-hmm. We're building a life's work here.
Right.
And if you want to be crass, the number of interviews with new clients that turn into paying cases, in my experience, correlates to everything that you're just saying. But it required the capital investment and opportunity cost of all the work that you both do and so many of our colleagues do, because we believe in it and it is our life's work. And that sometimes gets people over that hump. Was that crass enough?
I don't consider it crass. I consider, at worst, it's the unspoken truth. And some of that is a same tie-in in personal growth type stuff. I've always maintained that a huge part of the paradigm shift is not practical skills, but personal growth. What I learn about myself is way more important than how much time I spend memorizing protocols or deciding which is the right model to use. Now I've forgotten where I was going with that. Sorry. But I don't consider it crass to express that, yes, our clients are paying us. And why would they not deserve the best that we can give them? And once we acknowledge that, yeah.
Carl Michael, I want to introduce somebody on our little thing. It's my dispute resolution assistant. Maybe our next time we'll talk about how a dispute resolution assistant differs from a secretary. But Rebecca, who is now leaving for the day, I want her just to sit in my seat and say hello and take 1 minute and talk about her background, and then I'll let her go because she doesn't work on Fridays.
My background. Hello.
Hi,
I'm
Rebecca.
Hello. Anything specific? Let's see. I'm from Northern California. Did my undergrad at UC Berkeley and moved down here to get my master's in conflict resolution. My area of concentration is in family and divorce mediation. And now I am a 1L at Loyola Law School. So that's why I don't work on Fridays.
Okay. That's when you have classes?
No, I have class Monday through Thursday at night. So I leave work at 3 and then I go to school until like 10 o'clock at night. So, and then I do all my homework on the weekend. Friday.
So how long have you been working with Woody?
For what, 4.5 years? Yeah, since I started working here while I was finishing my master's.
Okay.
And then in between, I just, after working in the field a little bit, I decided that I definitely wanted to go back to school to get either a mental health degree or to get my JD. So while I was working here, I also spent quite a lot of time volunteering for a program called Kids First. It's mostly court-referred, high-conflict divorcing families. So they deal with the entire family. They have the parents divided up and then the kids divided up into age-specific groups. So my time spent there, really helped me to decide which route I wanted to go. So, okay, I'll give you guys back to the man. So.
Okay.
Thanks for saying hello.
Thanks for saying hello, Rebecca. All right, Woody, you're back on the hot seat.
It does take a village, and having a peacemaker who supports you in the office is another conversation that we can have. I'd like to see this grow. I'd like to see more squares up here of other professionals, colleagues that can join these conversations. All I know is I think about them a lot between Carl Michael and Billy. This has been wonderful. Because we had time up in Seattle, but not in this depth. This is great.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
I too hope we will get more people participating. Kind of maybe a little bit of a short notice by the time I got things together to get the information out. But I have capacity here for up to 6 of us, so 4 people could, we can get 3 more heads in here than we have right now, and that would be great. And I just want to say, from the perspective of the magazine, I don't want to see this limited, as I've said a couple of times. My partner Gloria Vanderhorst and I, we don't see the magazine as limited simply to trained collaborative professionals. I think I don't think I'm speaking out of turn, Woody, in saying you'd welcome untrained collaborative professionals asking questions. Maybe we can talk a little bit about it offline, but the prospect of a prospective client or a past client joining us here and talking about their experiences, I think would be incredibly valuable for trained professionals, curious professionals, and other prospective clients as well. So I'm seeing it open to everybody. And so I thank you both for your time and your involvement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, Billy.
Thanks,
Bye,
Woody.
Carl.
Bye-bye.
Okay, I'm going to just shut the recording down now. Bye all. Did I?